Hello, Sam.
Hello, Alasdair.
Oh my gosh, so long. We had a whole week off.
It was a Sam enforced week off. I kind of messaged Alasdair right before we normally record, and I was like, listen, babe, I am going away. I'm going away forever. And I'm off for a week, and I was like, I don't really want to bring my mic and setup with me to Lanzarote. Please, can we have a week off? And he very kindly said yes.
Yeah.
You didn't crack the whip this time.
I said, you're allowed, that's fine. I realised it was going to knock our scheduling out of kilter in that we might not hit the 5 Doctors for anniversary day. Well, we won't. I'm not planning to double up.
Well, do you know what I realised though? Cause the reason why I didn't feel, because I thought the same, but the reason I didn't feel as bad is because we actually weren't going to hit it anyway. We were going to have our 4th Doctor story be on the anniversary, and the week after the anniversary was going to be the 5 Doctors.
Oh, it was all over the shop. It's not even close.
Was because I was hoping we'd line it up that we'd, for anyone who's not been listening recently, we're doing one of the original Doctors episodes up until we get to the 5th Doctor, and we'll do the 5 Doctors for the anniversary. And then I realised that it wasn't going to line up anyway. So I was like, well, what's 2 weeks off then?
It'd be so crazy. Can you imagine if we were on someone else's podcast on the anniversary instead?
Wouldn't that be wild? I mean, if we were going to be on another Who podcast, we probably should have recorded it by now.
We probably should have already done that. And I wonder who that would be if we had done that.
I know. If we were going to go on another Doctor Who podcast, a quite well-known Doctor Who podcast, I don't know who we'd be on. I guess the viewers would have to guess and see.
All hypothetical, of course.
Yeah. We'll never know. Or maybe we will on the 23rd of November.
Yeah. How would you rate Lanzarote? Are there any Doctor Who filming locations in Lanzarote?
There are.
Oh, there are. There are.
We didn't go. There's 2. So, Perry, the 5th and 6th Doctor's companion Perry.
Mm.
Perry was introduced in an episode filmed in Lanzarote. I can't remember the name of it. I know the Master's in it. And she is on vacation in Lanzarote, and that's where the have you seen the scene of her drowning and Telos has to swim and save her?
No.
And she's got this little she's got this little inflatable bag of all her belongings. And what happens is she just jumps off a ship and starts swimming, and then just starts drowning for no reason other than, damsel. And so Turlo's watching her on a screen in the TARDIS. I went with Nick and friend of the pod, Josh, and me and Josh were watching it 2 days before. And Turlo's watching the TARDIS monitor and just watching her drown, and is like, ugh, humans. And he runs along the beach, jumps in, swims, and saves her. So that filmed in Lanzarote, but there's also a new Who filming location in Lanzarote as well. Kill the Moon.
Yes, that's the one.
All of the Moon was filmed in Lanzarote.
You know what? I knew it was that, or in my head it was Praxeus.
I watched Praxeus on the beach. Me and Josh, we were on the beach, and he was like, I want to watch a Doctor episode set on a beach. Do you want to watch Praxeus? And we were sunbathing, watching Praxeus on his phone. And Nick was next to us ugh, Doctor Who twinks.
Ugh.
Oh, God.
It's funny because in the 2 weeks off, I feel like I was so overwhelmed with Who. When we went to BAFTA Cymru, have we mentioned we went to BAFTA Cymru? That I think as a reaction to that, I actually couldn't think about Doctor Who anymore, apart from what we were immediately discussing. So I've not really done any Who stuff in the last 2 weeks at all, and I've suddenly hurtled back into it today for our rewatch, which has been quite nice. I did a tweet the other day to say what I thought was criminal, which was that the Doctor Who channel on Instagram, they have announcement channels.
Yeah.
You can follow, and they did that one of just posting here for any of the Martha fans who missed it, and it was just them saying we're doing a watch along of the best moments of series 3, and I was like, I actually think this should be illegal to send a notification to my phone from at BBC Doctor Who to say just posting here for any Martha fans who didn't see it. Evil behaviour,
criminal.
They shouldn't be allowed. But now we're going to gear up for Christmas very soon. I think Stephen Moffat confirmed a bit more about what's happening in that. I think we could have guessed it anyway. I think he was on the One Show. What a reliable news source I'm offering here. I think he said this is not even what is the second-hand, third-hand source. He, I think, said something it's a hotel that is using time travel to fill empty rooms from the past or something like that.
I'm trying to process that. That was kind of I'm trying to I'm interested to see it. Look, I'm interested to see the clip that I saw of them going through the different doors. That's an interesting way to I don't know. I'm curious. I don't want to. I feel like my thoughts on season 1 are so mixed that, like, from when I saw that clip of the Christmas, I was like,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay, let's see. So I'm curious to see how it will play out on screen.
Cheese ham toasty and a pumpkin spice latte. Let's see what happens.
There you go. There you go.
There we go. Well, anyway.
Well, on Wholala, we haven't done it for a few weeks. We've been a bit busy, but we love to hear your Doctor Who fan anecdotes, which are your tales of the TARDIS, tales of the Who world. And I've got a couple here. I've got one that's been sitting in the inbox for a while, so I'm going to read this one today, and then I have another that I'll save for next week. We have one here from Louis. He did say his name in the email, so I'm going to read it. He said, "Hi boys, started listening to the pod right around the end of the new series and I've inhaled it. I absolutely love it. I've also been sitting on an encounter with a famous face since around then. Despite having been a massive Who fan my whole life, I missed the opportunity to see any of the previous cinema screenings of any new episodes, so when they announced they'd be screening Empire of Death, my friend and I jumped at the chance. Come the day of a very delayed Uber Eats, meaning we're running a little behind, we rushed to the cinema and discussing our theories on the finale, talking Susan to his cameos. My friend, shout out to Dylan, is fairly decent at an impression of Russell T Davies, and he's telling me about the boom commentary, specifically Russell quoting that he told Susan to smell my minty breath. In response, I say, why would he say that? What a weirdo. Said with love, I promise. Just ahead of that, I hear someone laughing. I turn around and see a very familiar silhouette. It's him.
Oh.
It's Russell. He turns around, says hello, and asks if there's anything good on. He says that he's only here to watch Hey Dolly. He's lovely. We have a nice chat. I completely neglect to mention anything about how big of an inspiration he is to me, and instead he's very polite when I tell him that I hope that Sian Clifford is playing a future Doctor. That's been my fan cast for 16 since before her casting was announced. Tell me she wouldn't be great. As we talk with him, people start coming up for autographs and it becomes very apparent that we spoil his attempt to sneak quietly in without being noticed. If this makes it any way to Russell, I'm very sorry. In terms of classic episode suggestions, I would say Carnival of Monsters is maybe my favourite classic story I've ever seen. It's camp, it's got big ideas, rubbery sock puppet monsters, it's perfect. Relatedly, the Trashigs deserve a new run with Disney money, them and the Krillitane. Keep up the great work, and here's to an excellent 100 episodes, Louis. P.S. Image to include my credentials. P.P.S. I had to fight for the day off to see the episodes, and it turns out booking me at the restaurant I worked at before the screening, he would have been there. I would have met him anyway. Bonkers. And I will quickly show Alasdair the photo of Louis and Russell that he sent to her.
Ah, lovely photo. That's very funny.
Oh.
That's a great fan anecdote. I love it.
That's really lovely. Thank you, Louis.
Thank you, Louis. I very much enjoyed that. That was a great fan anecdote.
It's so funny to me in the story, the bit when you were saying about doing the impression of Russell, me like, what a weirdo. And then I can just kind of imagine Russell, like Father Christmas, come up and be like, ho, ho, ho.
Oh.
Like,
anything good on?
Oh, God.
Very funny.
Anything good on?
Love it.
Oh,
that's
God,
really funny.
That's so funny. Love it. Love it. Well, look, we don't want to hold you back anymore. If you've seen the episode of Wholala that you're listening to right now, you will know that we're talking about the second Doctor's episode, Tomb of the Cybermen. Now, as we mentioned, we are going through one of each of the 5 Doctors before we get to the episode 5 Doctors. And I was so excited to dive into this. I feel like this is one of the most iconic second Doctor episodes.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it is.
You're like, maybe. Okay, sure.
Yeah, I haven't seen any second Doctor stories all the way through yet, I don't think. I've only ever seen like clips and bits of the second Doctor, which is really bad. So glad that we're finally doing a full story.
Yeah, I have heard so much. So I've talked about this before. We haven't like done it on Hulu. I don't think Alistair's actually seen it. There's this documentary called More Than 30 Years in the TARDIS, which is a lot of my base knowledge from classic Who comes from this, and there's a lot of references and clips of the Tomb of the Cybermen in that. But I knew it was one of the most iconic ones, and it was one that I really wanted to. One thing I didn't realise is that this isn't the first Cyberman story in the second Doctor's era. The Moonbase was first, which for people who are, big fans of classic lore, they'll know that. But for me, I was like, oh, I was surprised. I thought it was the Mondas Cybermen with the first Doctor, and then this one, but there was one in between.
I actually wondered if this was the first Cyberman story.
Oh.
Naively.
It's
and
not.
no, it is not.
It's the 10th planet, the moon base, then the Tomb of the Cybermen. And I think the next one is the Invasion, I believe. And that's the one with the iconic like Cyberman popping through the sewers of London.
Lovely.
Well, look, a little context to this story. The original air date for the first part of this story came out on the 2nd of September 1967. It was written by Jerry Davis and Kip Pedler, with the director Maurice Barry. It had a viewership of between 6 and 7 million viewers and an IMDb score of 8.2 out of 10.
Lovely stuff.
Yeah, it also topped, which is like an interesting note. We were talking about this just before we started recording. This topped the VHS charts. It was one of the first, I think, classic Who stories to go on VHS, and it topped the VHS charts in the UK.
It topped the VHS charts because this was one of the lost stories that got returned in the early 90s. So it went missing, And then I think it was in Tokyo they had copies of this story, and it got returned back to the BBC. And so they released it in the early 90s, I think in 92. And it was so popular, I think someone claims it outsold Alien, or maybe it outsold them in the charts at that time. But there was other new releases in the charts that outdid it. It was number one on the charts for a period. Who fans?
I would love to do a whole Wholala episode at some point on the Lost episodes of Doctor Who. There's a really, really great YouTube video made by Josh Snares, friend of the pod. Josh, do you want to come on the pod? Then you'll be a real friend of the pod. And they were talking about how, like, the timeline of like how the episodes went missing and how they started coming back. And it's so mad to me, like, how recent episodes were still coming back. Like, I think it was 2013 that the Doctor episode with the second Doctor where he plays two characters, I think that one came back in 2013, like around the 50th. Like, that's mad to me. Like, and I'm sure that for people who may not be mentioned, Ian Levine, I'm sure they still have some classic episodes hidden in their cupboards that, like, there must be more classic episodes that haven't been discovered yet. It's mad to think.
I think a lot of them now exist in private collections, and people who aren't willing to give them up because they want to sort of trade them for something better, or because people want it so badly they enjoy having it more. And I think, ironically, all the while you keep it, the longer it goes on, I think the quality probably naturally degrades as well. So the longer it doesn't get digitized, the worse it is.
It's mad. Release the tapes! Release the tapes!
Release the tapes!
Well, look, for anyone who wants a quick recap of the story, it's on iPlayer, available to view in the UK. But if you don't know anything about the story, here is a quick recap of the Tomb of the Cybermen.
The second Doctor lands on the desolate planet Telos with his companions Jamie and Victoria. They encounter an archaeological team led by Professor Parry, who is there to investigate ancient ruins believed to be the resting place of the Cybermen, a race of emotionless cybernetic beings thought to be extinct. Despite the Doctor's warnings, the expedition team, funded by the ambitious and ruthless Clive and Kaftan, decide to open the massive tombs.
The team explores a control room filled with Cyberman technology. The Doctor soon realises that Cybermen deliberately left clues to their resting place, inviting explorers to revive them. Clegg and Kaftan, who belong to a group called the Brotherhood of Logicians, hope to revive the Cybermen and use their power to achieve global domination. Against the Doctor's wishes, Clegg activates the machinery, awakening the Cybermen and their towering leader, the Cyber Controller.
Chaos ensues as the revived Cybermen capture and kill several members of the expedition, revealing their intention to convert the humans into Cybermen as well. The Doctor, working quickly with Jamie and Victoria, devises a plan to outwit the Cybermen, leading them back into the tombs and sealing them inside once more. In a final confrontation, the Cyber Controller is electrocuted, preventing him from escaping and reactivating the tomb.
As the surviving members of the team escape, the Doctor remarks on the tragic cycle of the Cybermen's existence and their unrelenting drive to survive at all costs. The episode ends with the tombs once again sealed, leaving the Cybermen entombed, but a lone Cyberman escaping through the legs of the team as they head back to the TARDIS. Ooh. Now, we reached out to you on our X account, and Hamish reached out and let us know. He said, I think this is kind of a bad story, but with iconic moments peppered throughout. The Cybermen emerging, the family chat with Victoria, all the best Doctor Who moments. But it's also pretty generic and nonsensical runaround with some uncomfortable racial stereotyping. 5 out of 10. And I think that's I tweeted that out and asked for that before I watched this episode, because I always thought of this episode so iconic. And there's a lot to love in this episode, but the racial stereotyping was something that I was just not expecting, and it came up and I was like, oh,
I wasn't expecting it to, because I don't know if it just wasn't like well known to me going in that this was in there, but I think it was obvious that there are parts of Doctor Who in the 60s, 70s, well, all the way through, which are questionable. And whenever you, I think, search this story, that is always the part that comes up, is the depiction of Toberman. And it's definitely, I think, one of the really cringe-worthy parts of this, where you go like, oh, God.
I just think with a lot of classic Doctor Who, you're going to come across things that are just very emblematic of the period.
This is how someone else described it. They said that Toberman, although a hero at the end, is a mostly silent, servile black man, only utilised for his brute strength. And someone else said it played into the noble savage trope. That's the summary of how Toberman is used in this story.
It's really uncomfortable. He's the only black person in the whole story. He's the only person of colour in the story, except for actually Kaftan, who she is a white actress that was the makeup was used to sort of change her ethnicity in it. And you made a good point about the name of the character as well, which just sort of leads into
the name Kaftan is used, I think, just to imply kind of a vaguely foreign name for this character as well.
Yeah, and So I think this episode, it's not something that I personally have seen tons in Classic Who, but I've also not exposed myself to that much Classic Who. And certainly they weren't really pushing companions of colour or people in too many lead roles that weren't white. But it kind of surprised me in this episode. But I think that like, watching British TV in the 60s, it shouldn't surprise me, and it still does. And I'm glad to see that not all of Classic Who leans on that, and it's certainly the show developed as the Times did. But watching a show in the 1960s, it kind of took me by surprise. I was like, oh god. But anyway, moving on to more of a joyful thing. There are a lot of parts in this episode that I actually really like. I think there's a lot of camp in this episode. It's super early on. Victoria, she's obviously just sort of entered the TARDIS the first time, and she's getting her bearings, and she just turns to the Doctor and she's like, "What are all these knobs?" She's looking at the TARDIS, and I thought that was so funny.
What are all these knobs? A lovely introduction to the TARDIS. What are all these knobs?
I really want to go back and watch Victoria's reintroduction. I love Victoria. I want to talk to you about Victoria for a second. I want to see her episode with the Daleks where she's introduced, because I also think there's something so interesting about like a Victorian period England with the Daleks. And there's just something I love about a companion out of time as well. We've said about this on the pod loads about how we want a companion from the future or a companion from the past. And there's like a bit when she changed out of her outfit into a different like dress, and she's like, oh, it's a bit short. And obviously it's like super 60s and fitting of the time. But for a Victorian woman showing her ankles, she's like, well, the dress is a bit short. But she at the same time is like having these little tropes of being a Victorian woman. She really holds her own as like a strong written female character. Like every time they try and be like, oh, the women should stay up here, the women should stay here, she's defiant. It's like, absolutely not. Like, I will not be sat here rating, I will not be doing this. They try and say, oh, we'll break up into teams, one team goes this way, one team goes that way, and the women stay here. And she's like, well, we can be our own team, we can go out and explore stuff as well. And there's one bit, it's a bit clunkily written, where everyone goes down to the tomb and they say to Victoria and Kaftan, they say, oh, you two wait here up here. And she's like, no, I'm coming down. And the Doctor sort of pulls her aside and is like, oh, Victoria, you'll be safer here. And there's like the subtext that he's saying, keep an eye on Kaftan because she's dangerous and I trust you to keep an eye on her. But at the same time, he's also being a bit like, no, you stay up here where it's safe, Victoria. And
yeah,
I do really enjoy her defiancy. And I think they do a good job of not writing her too much like a damsel in distress.
I think they also bring in characters who are then deliberately chauvinistic and misogynistic and mock her to put her in a position where she can stand her own ground as well and resist that and kind of rise up to meet it as well, which is good later. So it's good they give her those opportunities, and they even meet that line in quite a funny way too, when she's like, but this dress is a bit short, and he's like, that's all right, Jamie's is shorter. And I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
I agree. Like, I think. Well, I mean, also, if you want to watch the previous story, you're kind of out of luck, because I think the Evil of the Daleks, she's introduced in episode 2, and I think the other 6 episodes are all missing. So
is it an animated one?
Evil
of the Daleks animated. Yes, it is. It's an animated one.
It's animated. I think there's the Telesnaps audio version of it as well.
Oh yeah, they're on iPlayer. I was gagged when I was looking this up to watch this episode. Like almost all the animated episodes of Doctor Who are available on iPlayer. I assumed it would have like a different licensing, because I'm looking at like the second Doctor's first series, and they do have like the moon base. Some of the moon base are missing and stuff, but like, it's mad how much this is available for free.
I know, it's great, isn't it? And they've also, it's actually, I was thinking today again, like, it's mind-boggling that they've subtitled it all, but they've also added audio description and they've added sign language for all of it.
Yeah.
Like, for the amount of it is, it's impressive as well, because the subtitling's really good on iPlayer. Like, it's a weird thing to be like, this is great subtitling, because obviously they have to change the words a bit sometimes to make it, like, appropriately concise for the screen.
Yeah.
But I, like, watch dramas now on, like, Now TV that are, like, prestige dramas, and the subtitles are just wrong often, and I'm like, that's not what he said.
They are! It's weird.
And it's like they actually have misheard the word. I'm like, this is lazy. So it's the kind of thing I think the BBC's done very, very well, and they take seriously, which is great. Back to the point about Victoria, though, before I get sidetracked.
Yes.
Anyway, she does appear in the previous story, right? I haven't seen much of Victoria, so this is all very first impressions for me. like I said, love the companion out of time thing. My feeling was, I think, partly in the way that they play the relationship between the Doctor and Victoria. There's a real like tenderness and care between the two of them, which is very sweet. Like there's this very like shy way he discloses his age to her. He's like, oh, it must be, let me think about this. Yeah, about 450. She's like, 450? And later on it comes back because they're like taking turns like sleeping and keeping watch because they've managed to lock out the Cybermen for now, but they're just all keeping guard. And then she kind of gives him an extra half an hour because she's like, well, I just thought since you're 450 and you're an old man, you probably need a bit more sleep. And he's like, oh, Victoria, you really didn't need to do that. I am quite lively, you know. And there's this thing, and then they have that beautiful conversation about, you know, her saying like, I miss my father, and him being like, oh, she's like, oh, you must miss your family, and he's like, I do, but they all live in here and I remember them and they are asleep in my mind and I can bring them back whenever I want and no one else can do what we do. And it's such a lovely, tender thing. And then when she goes down to go to sleep after that, he almost like tucks her in a bit. And there's something very gentle about their relationship together in that he doesn't patronize her in this story. I wouldn't say. There might be moments where actually I'm glossing over something hideously patronizing that he does. There is a lot of, like you said, a lot of like, well, we the men will go down here and the women will stay here. But you're right, there's a subtext to the way in which he treats her that is different. And there's something interesting, I think, as well about a companion out of time, specifically from like the 1890s, hopping into a sort of Cyberman story when they have no awareness of like, let alone kind of the future and other planets and spaceships, but actually has no experience of even basic electronics, where there's a strange like vulnerability for them because they're immediately at a disadvantage because they don't have any working understanding of like mechanics. You know, it's just
I didn't even think that. The bit when like they're all in the base and she needs to move the levers, so she's like trying to figure it out, and then she calls for help, and they're saying to her like, well, you saw them, like don't you know what they did? And she's like, I wasn't really watching, I didn't even think about the subtext that like she doesn't really know what technology is. Yeah,
so she's got that very different approach on it, but it's interesting because I think we're so used to now like the modern companion archetype stepping in and, you know, would kind of have some degree of competency always in these situations. I don't know, that, or some level of like, oh, you know, it's a spaceship and this is this and that's clearly a trap and that thing's obviously dangerous. But she like, when she picks up a Cybermat, you know, and if you're a New Who fan only, the Cybermats look pretty much the same. They are, you know, the Cyberman's caterpillars. They're little like, you know, bots that run around on the floor, and it's inactive, and the doctor tells her it's a fossil. No, or does she say it's a fossil? Someone says it's a fossil.
Jamie thinks it's a fossil.
Right. And she thinks it's quite charming, so she pops it in her backpack. And it's like clearly a stupid thing to do. Maybe a modern companion would have thought, no, don't put that you know thing in your pocket. But in her head, she's like, oh, well, you know, it's you know, it's dead. You know, it's not a living thing. You know, what harm could it cause? I guess she doesn't perceive it in the same way, so it just creates like a new element of risk for her in the story, which is just interesting. I think having a companion who's out of time and having to learn things in a different way.
Yeah, I never really thought that before. It's a really, really interesting take. I would love to see a modern companion be from out of time, whether it's from the future or the past. Like, I think there's fun in seeing someone from the past not really understand the tools of the future, but also a bit like with Susan, to be fair, when we looked at Unearthly Child last week, or 2 weeks ago. And she was saying about how she knows all this amazing knowledge about history overall, but she doesn't know how many like shillings are in a pound, because she doesn't. She's like so far beyond the knowledge that they have that's alien knowledge to her. The 2 episodes we've chosen to look at have the same like issue, but on different ends of the spectrum, like a character out of time from the past and the character out of time from the future.
Yeah, no, you're right. I like that a lot, actually. She still says such like endearing things when she's like, oh, fiddle, and just her scream as well is like legendary. And her scream in this is absolutely extraordinary.
Oh, it's an iconic Victoria scream. Do you remember there's a bit in, we haven't done a Wholala episode about dimensions in time yet, we will at some point, But she has like one line in this, and it's where all the companions like zipping in and out of time, and Victoria zips in, and the Rani's just been there, and the Doctor's kind of going on I think it's the seventh Doctor or maybe the sixth, is like doing a sort of monologue about the Rani, and Victoria's there, and all she says is, "Who's that horrible woman?" Like
Who's
that's
that
the only
terrible
line she
woman?
has. Oh, it's so funny. Oh, bless
That's the
her.
one bit. They didn't know quite how to do a Victoria for that bit. Poor Victoria.
No, exactly. I really liked the conversation about her and with her and the second Doctor about her father. It's a really, you mentioned a bit about where he kind of like puts her to bed and tucks her in. Like, it's such a tender conversation, and it really shows the care that the second Doctor has for, like, the companion cares for him in a way that she's like, oh, you know, you're 450, you need your sleep. It's like, oh, I'm quite sprightly, you know, but talking about her father and how she misses him, it's a really quote unquote unnecessary scene. It doesn't progress the plot of this episode, but it adds to one of my points I have, which is I think this is the closest I've seen to a classic Who story that could be very easy translated to a new Who story. Like, there's very little generally, I mean, that you would have to change about this story to make it an engaging 45-minute New Who episode. I think classic Who tends to be a bit long for my liking, but if you condense this into 45 minutes, there's not tons you'd have to change that would make this a really engaging New Who story. And I think a big part of that is you have the danger, you have the threat, you have the companions being independent, and you have, like, arguably what was missing in season 1 with Shooty and Millie. You have that moment where the Doctor and a companion get to speak about their issues or their fears or their anxieties. And I think that was such a necessary addition to this episode for something that could have so easily been written out.
I really like that he also says to her, I can't remember if by this point she's had this awful experience where she's had her, like, attempted, not quite killing, but she's been drugged and knocked out with something in her coffee, and she's had to wield a gun at some point in this as well, which is also quite camp. And then the Doctor is sitting with her, and he's like, "Are you having a nice time with us, Victoria?" And she says, "Oh, yes." It's like, Are you having a nice time? Are you having a nice time? Because your journey in the TARDIS sounds like hell. The Daleks killed your dad, then you flew here, now you're being attacked by the Cybermen. Someone wants you dead. It's quite something. Also, it's interesting. He's quite honest with her, which is interesting, because a lot of the character of the Doctor, I think when we go back, we always go and we say, like, New Who interpretations of the Doctor are fairly faithful to the core character of the Doctor. And so when you go back and you watch Classic Who, you go like, oh, this is very recognisably the Doctor. And the bits that surprised me about the second Doctor, I expected him to be very kind of, to have some Matt Smith-isms, which he absolutely does. Like, it's very there in the physicality, it's quite there in the humour, it's there in his kind of bumbliness, and I love all that. He's quite, he's still eccentric, but in a very different way to the first Doctor. But like, talking about his age and talking about his family, he just kind of presents a number and talking about, like, oh, but your family, you must miss them. He's like, oh yes, I do. And it's like, in a way that I think other Doctors tend to, like, obscure or withhold that information for as long as they can. So I don't know if we're thinking about, like, Susan particularly in that moment, when we're, like, thinking back to his family rather than, like, in a broader sense, like wider family we never meet on screen, but who knows?
Yeah. There's a really interesting, so you know how in the Wilderness years there was all this different Doctor Who media that wasn't, like, officially licensed Doctor Who stuff?
Oh, yeah.
So there's a movie that I really, there's a lot of stuff out, like there's the Auton movies and there's this and that, whatever. But there's a movie that I really would like to do for a Wholala episode at some point. And please, listeners, tell me if you want this as well. It's called Downtime. And basically, the BBC held the rights to the Doctor in Doctor Who, but different companies got licensing to make Doctor Who media. And there was a company called Real Time Pictures who made a lot of, like, made-for-home video Doctor Who movies, and they said that the basis for that was that the Doctor couldn't feature. So in Downtime, it's a story about Sarah Jane and the Brigadier and Victoria, and it's got Elizabeth Sladen, and it's got all the cast, and Deborah Watling comes back and plays Victoria in present-day England, but she becomes an antagonist. So she's not like the big bad, she becomes a bit of a pawn, and it's sort of interesting to see one of the Doctor's companions go rogue without him to guide them. And, in main Doctor Who, she's very innocent, very naive at times. And in this point, she's become very, like, cold and distant, and she becomes a bit of a pawn to the villain's larger game. And from what I've heard, it's genuinely some of the best writing and performance that the character Victoria's ever had. And she's on screen alongside Sarah Jane and the Brigadier. And it's also the introduction to Kate Stewart as well, who they then brought into mainstream Doctor Who. I would love to do a Hulu episode about this at some point.
Interesting, a different version. Also, we didn't talk about Jamie yet. Have you seen other Jamie stories?
Do you know what? The only Jamie story I've seen is, ironically, we'll finish on it. It's in The Five Doctors. I've not watched much Jamie, but there's a bit, I know that Jamie and Zoe lose their memories at the end of their tenure, and there's a bit when Gallifrey shows them projection as they're heading towards the tomb of Rassilon to try and avert the Doctor and his companions. And the second Doctor sees Jamie and Zoe, and they're like, "Please, Doctor, leave, you've got to go." And he's like, "No, you're only apparitions, you had your memories wiped." But no, I've not seen much Jamie, so I was interested to see him in this. I liked him, but I mean, given by how we've just spent 10 minutes talking about Victoria, I feel like in this episode at least, much as I know that Jamie was introduced first and he also Jamie, I think, other than Ben and Polly, ran through the entirety of the Second Doctor's. He's a bit Yazzie in that he ran through the entirety of the Second Doctor's tenure. In this story, I didn't feel like he made as much of an impression on me as Victoria did.
No, I'd agree. My few notes were that when they do have a bit of playful banter off one another, it's clear they have like a very established relationship at this point already, the Doctor and Jamie, and I'm kind of like, I'm like curious as to what I've already missed, because they obviously have like a trust and an understanding, and Jamie seems very at home in this environment, traveling with him, and he's clearly very loyal. They've got a little bit of a banter going on, like the Second Doctor will like, I keep calling him the Second Doctor. The Doctor will like, he'll crack a joke, like a bad dad joke, and then immediately look at Jamie, and Jamie will kind of look at him, and he'll be like, "I'm sorry, Jamie," and it's like immediate, and then they move on, and it's so fast. And there's that bit like early on as the doors first open to the tomb, and the two of them kind of reach out thinking the other one is someone else, and just briefly hold hands, then bat each other away, which fun fact, spoiler, sorry, was coordinated by Patrick Troughton and Fraser Hines. They like worked it out before they filmed it. They realized that with the recording schedule and the likelihood it wouldn't be possible to do a retake, it would have to be left in, even though it wasn't scripted or directed. So funny little moment, but also like nice when I think there's a good on-screen chemistry, like the actors get it, they think it, they understand what the relationship is too.
There is such a thing about the Second Doctor and his male companions. Online, everyone thinks him and Ben were together. Everyone thinks that him and Jamie were together. And you know what? I'm here for it all. I agree with it all.
The Second Doctor in this one, I'm so sorry, I keep saying the Second Doctor, but the Second Doctor in this, I think he must have been a basis for a lot of Matt Smith's performance, because I just see a lot of it in him and vice versa. Something about the voice, something about the mannerisms, something about the facial expressions, something about even like the mop of hair. Like there just seems to be some kind of overlap there that I really like. And there's something of a gentleness, I think, to the Second Doctor, at least in this story, which I quite like. However, I would say in this particular story, the Doctor is quite a passive character in a way that doesn't feel, I mean, the Doctor feels very decentered in this story. The Doctor is kind of just, things are happening in the presence of the Doctor. I feel like the Doctor is kind of there, but is allowing things very much to unfold in their own way without much intervention. And that's what led me to think, like, is this the first Cyberman story? Because I thought the Doctor does not seem remotely alarmed by, the big glaring insignia of the Cyberman on the door, or seeing that this was like a weapons testing room for a Cyberman, or, like this is the room where we defrost the Cybermen. Like it always just seems very like, and it's like, he's not opening the door, he's defrosting the Cybermen with his controls. And then the Doctor kind of goes like, oh yeah, no, I know. I just wanted to check if that's what the plan was. And to what end?
No, that is a weird
To what
thing.
end?
Yeah, I noticed that. To what end? I thought the same when he was like, "Oh, I did want to know if that was your plan," and it is. I'm like, okay, well, he does that
Now
a couple
stop
times.
it.
Like when he pretends to worship, he's like, "Oh, I would like to work with you. You could be the ruler of Earth." And Jamie's like, "No, Doctor." He's like, "No, Jamie, listen. He could rule us all." And he's like, I can be the master of Earth." And then the Doctor's like, "Well, I thought you were insane. I just wanted to check. So,
Just wanted to check.
but
And truly, you are.
You're so right. Again, I was gonna save it for the fun facts, but Matt Smith, he watched Tomb of the Cybermen in prep for playing the 11th Doctor, and he said that it made him an immediate fan of the season and was even inspired to wear a bow tie because of Patrick Troughton. He also said that he thinks that the Tomb of the Cybermen is the scariest Cyberman story ever. So I thought that was interesting.
Interesting. I'll come on to that, I think, with like what makes a Cyberman story scary. And what makes it scary for me. But last thing I'll just say about the Second Doctor, I'm glad to hear that. I didn't know that he'd watched this story specifically. I was like, I'm sure there's some inspiration, and I had no doubt there would be a quote from Matt Smith about the Second Doctor and the bow tie overlap, of course. But the other thing I noticed about this Doctor is he doesn't seem too bothered when people die. Like, just like seems pretty like, I don't know, just quite like, oh, another one's down. Oh, they're
gone. Do you know what got me is when he's on watch after he sends Victoria like to go to bed, and he's like sat there with the gun. It reminded me of the Scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz when they're going to the witch's castle and he's holding a little pistol. Like the Doctor was just going to sit there on watch holding a little handgun. And I was like, that's weird. That's so. But weird. Again, like this was when they were crafting the show, and I think this is what 5 years after Doctor Who had first sort of come onto screen, so they still were figuring out what Doctor Who was.
Yeah, and he's quite happy to use, I think, all the way through Classic Who, to be honest, but much more like direct and slightly violent means to stop his enemy. So, like, there's a part where the gang is being converged on by a bunch of Cybermen, and they're all a bit screwed. And then the Doctor's like, quick, we got to use this wire, like spread out this wire on the floor and then get inside the circle, and creates a circle with a wire and they all get inside it, and then all the Cybermen go kaput. And he's like, brilliant, like it created a magnetic field, and they quite literally had a mental breakdown. And there's all these just dead Cybermen on the floor. And so he's a lot more just like, no.
Just no, but I do like how like there are little flashes where you see the Doctor know he's the smartest in the room, but kind of fucking with people. There's the line where he says like, I think we should see what the archaeologist thinks about it. And he's like, oh yes, I agree. And the Doctor turns to someone else and he goes, I love to see the experts at work, don't you? When like he knows that he's smarter than them. And I just think that's such a funny way of showing, rather than like, because I'm clever. Like he knows he's the smartest room. He doesn't have to prove it. He wants to see what they all make of it. And I thought that was really fun.
It's that, isn't it? He's not smug. At least not in this story, right? Because this is our like first reaction to a Second Doctor story. So like someone else might be like, actually, the Second Doctor's really smug, but famously smug. I thought this too. There feels like there's a bit of an overlap between the 10th Doctor in Silence in the Library and this Doctor, you know, bullying archaeologists, the experts at work.
I know. I love to see that tie like come across.
And it's just like, I'll be like, how did you know that, Doctor? It's like, because I was keeping my eyes open and my mouth shut. Like, you could learn from me. And so it's just like, but a very like, you know, gentle ribbing, much more than the Doctor's kind of like, you know, 10th Doctor's like massive eye rolls. So like, oh, archaeologists. I point and laugh at archaeologists.
There is a nice subtle, which is funny to say about the Second Doctor because he's such a child, but there is like a fun subtlety with the way that he shows his intelligence, and there's a lot of fun to be had with him.
Yeah.
I would love to talk a bit about the Cybermen.
Yes.
And specifically why I like the fact that all of the characters in this say Cybermen and not Cybermen. I just find
did they say Cybermen?
Like,
yes.
Did you notice so many people in here, they're like, but what about the Cybermen? Like, I don't know why, it just tickled my brain. I'm just so used to Cybermen. They were like, the Cybermen.
The Cybermen. Yes. The Cybermen. So I was thinking this. It's I think what I find scary about a Cyberman story is the process of becoming a Cyberman, much more than like the zombie threat of Cybermen approaching you and threatening to take over the world. It's more like the horror of like for me, quite literally, like the surgery. Like I always have that like very blazed in my mind of the Age of Steel, Rise of the Cybermen, like, you know, the Wimble Way playing when it's Exactly, with like, you know, syringes and scissors and, you know, spinning around and, you know, like the idea of them kind of like scooping out your brain and putting it in a metal suit and everyone feeling cold when they get their emotions back because they're just brains inside metal. And I was like, oh, how horrible. And this one, you kind of just meet them at a point that like that's done. In their history, they're quite advanced. Like they've already done that bit. Like everyone's a Cyberman now, but they've just kind of started running out of fuel and they've started running out of resources. So they've just kind of frozen themselves until a point that it's convenient they get released again.
Well, they're just like, we'll freeze ourselves till someone clever comes along.
Until someone
we'll
clever,
make sure you're clever because we'll put a lot of tricks in the way.
Yeah. We'll put some tricks in the way to make sure that we get a really good intellect when we do convert you. And so like the bulk of their like conversion work is done. So in that sense, I don't know if I find them scary in this, but I can imagine if I was a child of the 60s, this would be incredibly frightening because their costumes really are scary, I think.
Yeah, the bit when they're all on the floor and they're like, you're really smart, you have logic, you would be converted to be our leader, you be converted next, we'd freeze you while we're waiting to do them. Like, and maybe it wasn't me properly paying attention, but I didn't realize that Toberman, like, one of his arms is cyber. Like, I just thought they'd mess with his head, but he's physically like started to be converted. And I agree with you that I have the two, but like in the same way that we're a child of the noughties and we have etched in our brains forever, Age of Steel, snip, snips. I'm sure that the children who watched this and people who like watched it on VHS when it came out have the same feelings in their head. I really like that. Again, like I said, I think classic Who stories just run on a bit long. This does get a bit long. There's a lot of back and forth between upstairs, downstairs, upstairs, downstairs. But it's a really good story overall. I love the idea. And I do feel like classic Who has tried to be emulated in New Who, where I think Nightmare and Silver and Ascension of the Cybermen both basically tried to be the New Who Tomb of the Cybermen, and neither one of them really succeeded in my eyes. But it's a very engaging story. I like the line. It's really iconic. It's not even funny. It's just a very iconic line when Two says, perhaps the Cybermen aren't quite as dormant as you imagine. Like, it's a very... I don't know if I heard it on a documentary, if I've just seen it on Twitter or what, but like, it's such an iconic Doctor Who line. And it does carry a lot of weight and there is fear, but my goodness, the Cybermen in these stories are impossible to understand. I don't normally watch things with subtitles, but when it was like, I think there's a bit where they talk about like a computer and it's like, the man's frame on the computer.
Really?
And I was like, excuse me, Mark, sir, what are you saying?
I found it okay. So I wonder if it's different on different speakers or if I was actually relying on subtitles more than I thought I was.
I didn't have subtitles. It was when he was talking about a genocide and Jamie was like, what do you mean cause a genocide? And I was like, when did he say that? Like, and I had to like go back and put on subtitles. I was like, oh, fuck, like...
Yeah.
You know.
I was going to say, I really like this voice. I thought it was good because I think this one... Some of the voices from around this time can be a bit goofy on the aliens. And at this point in time, I'm jumping to the... what's the one-eyed green alien from the Third Doctor's era?
Alpha Centauri.
Alpha Centauri. It's like, oh, we are in terrible danger. We must get out of here immediately. I'm just like, and it's camp. It's funny, but it's also just like, it's someone doing a high-pitched voice. Can I say that? Like, I feel like I'm insulting someone's like legacy and work here.
I think that is actually their dialect, but whatever.
Just the way that, they speak as loud as they can. Oh, this is a disaster.
But do you know why I think I found it difficult? Because I really liked... I know we've not probably watched the episode, but have you seen clips of the 10th Planet, the first Cyberman story? Because they're like, you will become like us. Like, it's the same kind of thing, but it's like they turned up the cybernetic in this one just a hair too much for me to like kind of understand. I still think that, like, and again, it's the 2006 like Doctor Who child in me, that the Russell T Davies era Cybermen have the best voice, I think, personally. But I really like the 10th Planet ones. But these ones, there was just a few times it was a little bit too cybernetic. I don't know.
The thing that I quite liked when it worked really well for me was there was a moment when I really actually felt a lot of sympathy for a Cyberman. And it was the part where the Cyberman in episode 4 is running out of batteries, basically. And it's starting to struggle with the next thing.
Come on, Severus.
And Mr. Potter, what are you doing in the hall at this time? Your father was an idiot, Mr. Potter. And it gets into this machine to like, I actually had lost track of what was happening at this point in the story. I think it was charging, repairing, whatever. And they put it in its box, and just before they shut the door on it, it kind of goes like, You understand how to use the machine? And it's kind of like asking in a very like, yeah, right, you know what to do, right? Do you need me to talk you through? No. Okay, right. I'm going to get in this, and when I come out, I'm going to kill you. But it something about like it's like sad, low battery voice where they're having to
it kind of like goes down. It's like, I'm running out of power.
Yes,
like it does
exactly.
that. Like,
but I felt like, and then they have to like kind of like help it along a bit because it's like really struggling, and they're like, right, come on this way, and it's funny because they're like helping because they think they can contain it inside its case, and Jamie's like, oh, they'll never get out of that, and then 2 minutes later, Jamie, remind me to give you a lesson in tying knots. But there's just a brief period where that voice really worked to make him feel quite sad. Like there was the other villain in this, like Eric Clegg, who is like convinced that he can master the Cybermen and become powerful. I found like, and it's just betraying humanity in the process, right? His head. I wanted to smack his head by the end of this. He was really like a villain that I like enjoyed hating. Like I hated him in this, and like that's a good thing. I think. Like I really hated him, but there was no redeeming him for me. There were so many opportunities where he could have like been humbled, and he just kept getting back up and getting worse, and I just hated him. But the Cybermen I felt a little bit sad for.
Yeah, no, I see what you mean. My note said, the two human villains are annoying. Yeah, I feel like when he awoke the Cybermen and killed the guy, and when he's talking to Kaftan about it, and he's like, you weren't there, you've not seen the power they have, you've not seen how horrific they are. I feel like he could have turned a corner there, but then he's like, oh, now I have a gun. I will have ultimate power because I have a gun. And I'm like, you're meant to have a gun.
Wait, think about it.
And like when he gets the Cybermen, they're like, that doesn't work on us. He's like, shit.
No.
Like, what were you thinking? I don't know.
But he was just the worst.
Going.
He is just the worst. But that also like mirrored, I think, very much like the Age of Steel Rise to Cybermen thing as well. Like where they had, who was their inventor in that in the parallel world? What was his name?
John Lumick.
Lumick, right? Where he felt very Lumicky in that he was quite, dispassionate and felt very above people and obsessed with like the logical next step and removing emotion from things. And he was that like human enabler for Cybermen to become what they become. So it's, I think, always an interesting kind of type of character to come back to in a Cybermen story. But he was one that I like love to hate.
I feel like you need that, yeah. And I like, we do have, because we have the Cybermen as the villain, but then we also have these human villains. We also have the Cybermats, which are a really fun thing to play on this, because, I mean, obviously, Cybermats have been in several classic Who stories. I've seen Revenge of the Cybermen, and they're in that. I think I think this is the first introduction of them, but then they were obviously in the 11th Doctor Cyberman story as well. I think that they're quite iconic, and I like that in this episode we get different designs, like Cybermat version 1, the short one, Cybermat version 2, the one with the kind of like fluffy bottoms. I like at the end, and I think that what they did at the end of Nightmare in Silver with like one Cybermite surviving, it was very that, like they trapped the Cybermen in the tomb, they're trapped but one of the Cybermats escapes, and you just kind of see it at the end of the story. I think that was really fun. But yeah, I like the mix of villains that we get in this. Just talking about villains and stuff, there's this bit where the Cyberman's fighting Toberman, and I do have a note. I think that there are some really, really interesting and dynamic filming when Toberman fights the Cybermen, both in like, I think it's episode 3 and episode 4. We get these really cool like under angle, over the head shots of them fighting.
Yeah, there was some interesting shots in this one. Yeah,
it's some of the best cinematography we have in this whole episode. But then there's a bit where Cyberman like picks up Toberman to like throw him across the room. But for like 10 seconds before they throw him, you see this wire hooked onto the back of his shirt, and then it's kind of pulling him before the Cyberman started lifting. So I was like, oh my god, can he fly? And then the Cyberman's like, oh no, I'm gonna throw you out. And I was like, this is camp.
It was so camp and so bad. They honestly, Toberman starts to just like levitate, like he's fighting a Cyberman. It's wrestle to the left, to the right, and then suddenly, arms out, he floats away, and then it becomes apparent, like, no. Hey, the Cyberman's picked him up. You see, you must make believe, and then he throws him. And I'm pretty sure when he lands, he's still got the wire attached. They didn't even bother to like. I mean, wow. There was a lot of little moments like that which were like really ropey. They're like when they trap the Cyberman in the earlier mentioned foil box, cage, charger, whatever they put it in. It kind of punches its way out, and it's so obviously just like cardboard and like foil. It's so cheap. It's so cheap. And there's another point as well. I think another Toberman fight with a Cyberman, and he wrestles with the Cyberman, drags it off screen to the right, and then still as part of the same shot, they kind of re-enter scene, and he's got the Cyberman over his head, but it's very clearly been replaced with like a limp dummy, and he's like, yeah, and he yeets this clearly dummy Cyberman, which is now like so much more hollow and like completely deplumped compared to a human person. Does not land with the correct weight at all, and just kind of bounces off the controls.
Like,
yeah. I thought that was very funny. It has a certain charm.
Yeah, it does. One thing I noticed in this, they keep fumbling lines. There's a few times the Doctor does it once, one of the side characters does it, where they'll be talking and they'll say something like, I don't know, we've got to go round the back and stop the Cybermen, and they like fumble on a line, but like they don't cut it out. It happens quite a few times.
Yes,
and, like,
it does. Yeah.
I just think that's the very like wobbly set, like gotta shoot this now charm that I think Classic Who has to it. And then it's like matched as well with like this episode, more so than I've noticed in other episodes that we've watched for Classic Who. It has a really engaging score. Like the theme that happens when the Cybermen are like being defrosted, I thought was really powerful, like as a score, and really engaging. I really, really liked it. It was something that you notice it more than me in episodes, especially when we watch New Who, but I felt like the score was something that I was noticing in this episode.
It was a really standout theme. Like it's very jarring to listen to, but it's meant to be. And it's meant to be like dread, because out climb the Cybermen from their from their, what are they in? They call it the honeycomb, but they're in their little stasis pods or whatever.
Tombs.
In their tomb, sure. And that in itself is such a cool shot, like them all clawing their way out, and there's some photography of that moment as well, and the photography goes so hard, like the set design of that moment, the coordination of the way that all these different Cybermen are kind of climbing their way out, and they kind of like push their hands through this like layer of film that separates them from the outside, like they're all sort of clawing their way out of their little like embryos. It's very icky, but it's done really well. It's a really good shot.
And then you get the shot in the final episode where they're like, we're going to refreeze them, and suddenly they just reverse.
They just reverse the shots.
Like, whoop! Back in. It's funny. It's funny.
It is funny. I love what they do. I mean, design wise as well, cyber designs. I quite like the janky Cyberman designs. Like when they look a bit more botched, I actually think it really works well, and I much prefer this design to the kind of like 11th Doctor era, New Who, like much more recent Cyberman design. That's they have these very slick designs, and they have lasers, and I'm like that one, because now I guess they're just meant to be like so advanced that they're like impenetrable, and that's less interesting to me than these like very like nasty conversions that don't really have a ton of aesthetic value. They're very practical conversions, and they are just kind of like horrible meat bags like for people to kind of like limp around in. And like if you think about like cyber converted Bill in series 10, and she's got a classic Cyberman conversion, and she's got like a big kind of like electrical box on the front of her, and she's almost got like the old like washing up glove hands and everything. But I find that actually much more effective to the horror for me, because of the way it just looks like a suit kind of stretched over a something that's recognizably human, rather than a robot. Like, it's still halfway. And because it's kind of ugly and weird looking and just like holes for eyes and, you know, tape for mouth and everything, I think it's actually a bit more freaky, in my opinion. So I like that design.
Yeah, I think they did it well in the Doctor Falls, like the 12th Doctor finale, where they went back and sort of re-showed you what it was like when they were making the Cybermen. But I would like that whenever we next see the Cybermen, I personally would like to move on from the Cybermasters. I'm not personally a huge fan of that storyline. I agree with you about the like. I'm just looking at a photo of a Cybermaster now, and they have these like beautifully intricate Time Lord sort of crusts around the head and this armor that's very medieval with the big glowing blue light in the chest. I would quite like a Cyberman story where maybe like a Cybermat or something has. You could even, if you want, do like a direct sequel to something like this, where a Cybermat or something, a Cybermat or whatever, has escaped with data from the Cyberium, and it moves to like, I don't know, it doesn't have to be Victorian or something primitive, and it makes a cyber, a bit like what Torchwood was trying to do with Cyberwoman, but not make a cyber
but not
like actually make like a cyber suit that is purely functional. Ashad-esque, where it's like it's not quite working. Like I liked how you described it, like just like a sack of meat. And that's like the first of this new line of Cybermen. And then then each time we see the Cybermen, I don't necessarily want to see one costume for the Cybermen now be the costume throughout. Like maybe each time we see them, they've like developed it a little bit more. And like maybe we learn that the Cybermen really can't convert Time Lords and it only works for a short length of time. And then that species died out. And now all we have is like the remnants of this old race of Cybermen. And that could be like an interesting way to go forward with them.
You're right, because if we went, because like with the Lumic Cybermen, they're kind of like they're designed by people, so that makes sense. They look like robots because they're designed by a human and a team to look like that. On the version of this, which is almost like a very like bastardized evolution of a person into a weird hybrid next stage, where it's part man, part machine. I like the idea that it would like evolve in quite like an ugly direction that is very functional but very horrifying. So it's like super efficient but really weird and looks quite broken and wrong. That's my pitch for how we upset children next.
Well, I had a lot of fun with this episode, but you also know what I have a lot of fun with, Alasdair.
What you had a lot of fun with?
It's a little game called Camp or Die!
Oh my god, it's been a while!
Well, for anyone who hasn't listened to an episode of Wholala in a while, Camp or Damp is a little game we like to play where we go through moments in the episodes and things that we think are camp and things that we think are damp. Alice, are you ready to play it?
I'm ready.
What are all these knobs, camp or damp?
Camp. Very camp. What are all these knobs? I think at this point this isn't even what she sounded like in the episode. But immediately jumped out to me as a good line.
It's so good. Toberman's Wire, camp or damp?
The Wire is camp. The way he begins to float away before anyone's had a chance to pick him up. They're just they're wrestling and then he starts to float off. So for me, that's camp.
I think that's camp. It's so funny. It was just that like, I was watching, I was like, you know, like when you watch an old animated cartoon and there's like a dusty old bookshelf and it's all painted beautifully and then one book is like bright red because you know that's the one the character's going to grab. Like that was how it felt for me. I was like, oh, he's going to go somewhere. I'm
just like, even an improved angle could have fixed that. But they were just like, nah, that's fine. Leave it in.
Like, it's fine.
That's fine. Don't worry about it.
And finally, Jamie, remind me to give you a lesson in tying knots. Camp or damp?
It's camp and it's kinky. And you know that there's subtext there between the two of them. If we had the 15th Doctor and Jamie together now, both in their kilts, they're in love. For the amount of time that the second Doctor spent with Jamie, they'd have fallen in love by now. And that's good. 100%. That's a good thing.
And I love that. That's good. Well, I've got a couple fun facts for you about this episode as well. Now, this is just one of 7 of the 21 Patrick Troughton serials which exist in their entirety. All other of the 24 serials have missing episodes, or some of them are completely missing. I had a quick look on iPlayer before this, and this is actually the first second Doctor story to be complete in its entirety. All the others are animated.
God, we really, archiving at the Beeb, what were they doing?
We have got to, let's find them, everyone. We've got to run to the streets, knock on doors. We've got to find the episodes.
Hunt them down.
As you said, this serial was released on the BBC video cassette in May 1992, just a few months after being rediscovered. And in 2002, it was released on DVD with a digital remastered picture quality that the restoration team did, and a commentary from Fraser Hines and Deborah Watling.
Oh.
Yeah, they would have loved Deborah Watling, Fraser Hines. You love the Doctor Who collection.
They love the collection. I also remember at the end of the Daleks in Colour, we got that quick montage of kind of like, and the story goes on for another 60 years. And we get all these moments in colour. I think there might be moments from this episode where he says, it's the TARDIS, it's my home. I think might be one of the bits that's in colour.
It's such an iconic moment of Doctor Who history. I think it probably was.
Yeah.
And this one's just like a fun little fact, I thought. Orange squash, while filming, was specifically provided in the studio for the actors playing the Cybermen, as they got incredibly hot in their heavy costumes. So they just gave them all orange squash to try and cool them down, which I thought was quite fun.
I love that. Why orange squash and not water? Why it had to be squash is what intrigued me. It had to be
squash. I don't know. I guess they just had like a tray. They were like, okay, this coffee and tea and water and everything's for everyone else, but this squash, this orange squash, this is for them.
You know, like older generations are like really resistant to the idea of just drinking water for hydration. Like they're just like, what? Like, why do they only drink tea and coffee and alcohol and that's it. Like, that's the lot. And then I guess orange squash are like, right, it's flavored, so they can have that.
Exactly.
that's why we'll do that. I had some other fun facts, I've got a couple others I can share with you.
Bring them over.
Okay, did you know that filming in Lime Grove Studios in the summer was so hot that Shirley Cooklin actually fell asleep while playing Kaftan's corpse? Her castmates only realised she was asleep because she started snoring.
I did not know that, and that's actually really, really funny. That's so stupid.
Did you also know that Telos is one of the planets that gets a shout out in the Empire of Death as places the Doctor's been that will now have a version of Susan Twist on them?
I did. It's weird. There's lots of places for that. I feel like it was mentioned somewhere else in New Who. I can't remember where. But
also, I was kind of wondering,
I remember that.
Is there anything else on Telos at this point? They're kind of just mining and looking for the ruins of the Cybermen. And, I mean, presumably, I don't know. I kind of thought it could create a weak projection of Susan Twist when he lands Sutek, kind of within the distance of the TARDIS type thing. And the more times he landed, the stronger it got. But, as far as we know, he only ever landed there once and kind of in a quarry. So there's kind of some very loose version of Susan Twist who is maybe a Cyberman? I don't know. How that's...
I never really thought about it like that, but you're so right.
It wasn't a good example for him to pull out of places he's been.
Well, thank you for joining us on this visit to the second Doctor's era. We hope you're enjoying our little zip through the Whoniverse. Next week, we will be revisiting a third Doctor story, and we would love to know what you would love us to watch. I would really like to watch Doctor Who and the Silurians. That's my vote. Alice, do you have any third Doctor stories you want to look at?
I would like someone to shout out a story, I think, that particularly brings out the bondiness of the third Doctor and his suave, spy-like nature.
On the anniversary day last year, Alistair and I celebrated. We hung out and we watched the Day of the Daleks. And that's the one where Three's like, have you tried this cheese? It's quite good.
It's quite good. He's happily drinking wine. He's having a lovely time, Three.
That's a fun one. Well, please reach out to us on all of our social media. We are at Wholala Pod everywhere. That is X, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads. Please email us your Doctor Who fan anecdotes. That's on wholalapod@gmail.com. And you can rewatch old episodes of the podcast on our YouTube channel, also at Wholala Pod.
Yes, you can. If you enjoy this episode, you can rate us 5 stars wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can follow us so you get notifications when we drop new episodes. And you can share this podcast with someone who you think might enjoy it. And that helps us find new friends of the pod.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for listening. We hope you have a lovely week. And we will see you next time when we're revisiting the third Doctor.
See you then.
Bye.
Bye.